So in today's session, we are going to implement something really interesting in Angular, and that is translation and localization. As you can see here, we have a couple of languages. We can select the language that we want, and as we see, the text is changing based on the current specified language. This is really useful when it comes to actually increasing your user base. So let's see how we can achieve this in Angular. Before we touch any piece of code, we need to make sure that we have all the required libraries. The dependencies that you are going to need are simply two. Two libs are all that we will need. The first one is Ngx-Translate core. The second one is Ngx-Translate HTTP loader. Simply install them inside your projects folder. For me, for example, I'm in this folder for my application. I installed the first one and I also need to install the second one. And you will see where we are actually going to use them. After that, you can simply start your project. Now, having installed those two libs, the first thing you have to do is to configure your app config so that it's possible for you to actually introduce these libraries to your application. Okay, all right. The first line you will need to add is provide HTTP client, and then inside it simply add with fetch so that in case you are in SSR, it's going to be possible for you to use the fetch API. Then the other important part which we need to actually focus on is this section here. Here, what we are doing is simply we are importing providers from, because we are using a standalone approach. So what we need to do is to wrap our translate module inside import providers from, and we pass it as an item of the array. All right. So here, as you can see, we are simply saying translate module for root because we are in the app root. Okay. And then we are specifying our default language. In our case, it's English. Then we are saying loader, and then this loader is actually what will actually load our translation files. And we are going to do so using a factory, as we are going to discuss in the next part. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is to provide translate loader. Then when we provide this translate loader, we are going to use a factory for us to be able to actually load our translation files. And then this factory will have some dependencies, and this one has been made available using this line. Okay, all right. So if we take a look at our translate loader factory, we see that the signature is so simple. Like all you need to do is to call it, yeah, and pass inside it a parameter, the HTTP client, and you simply return a new translate HTTP loader, which will actually go through the folder that we have specified here. So if we hover on this, we see that it has to accept a HTTP client, then a prefix. This prefix is the path that you are going to actually have all your files, and then the suffix is the extension. In our case, is .json. So if we expand our editor here, we see that in our public folder, we have added a folder here, assets, and then in assets we have localization. You can name them any way that you want. Like you can have this as maybe our files, anything that you want, but for us we go with localization. Then you set all the localizations that you want inside here. So what this will do is that it will actually traverse through this folder, and then using HTTP client, it will actually know this is the path that I'll be looking for whenever the user has said Arabic and so forth. So what if we want our default language to be something else other than English? Yeah, let's say maybe Arabic. We save, we come back to our browser, we reload, we should see that Arabic is the default one. If you want it to be maybe Swahili, you save and then you go back, you see that it's actually Swahili, and so forth and so forth. So one thing you have to understand is that this default language is really important. Why is that the case? For example, should you miss on a single translation, or should you miss a translation line, then the fallback, which is the default one, for example, English, is what will be used, as we will demonstrate in a few minutes. Okay, so let's say for some reason, yeah, you forget to actually add a corresponding translation. For example, in our case, if we take a look at this section, we see congratulations, your app is running. And if we translate it to Portuguese, we should see this. Okay, so what if we forget to add a corresponding translation of this section in the Portuguese file? So let's first remove it to just test this out. We come here in our Portuguese file, we remove this section. We go back to our browser. Remember, our default is Arabic. So if we go to Portuguese once again, we should see the Arabic text is actually persisted. So that tells you that the language that you set as the default language, and we will see that in a few minutes when we introduce our translation service, that is the language that will be used to fill in for any missing translations, as we have seen right here. All right, now that you have seen how it's possible to actually cater for missing translations, that means that you have to make sure that the default language is actually targeting most of your users before you actually start creating the other translation files. That brings us to the next section. How do we actually get to create all these translation files? For example, Portuguese, we have Arabic, English. Let's actually open the default one. In our case, we say that English. Let's actually roll back to have English as our default language right there and also here. And now let's open the other remaining translation files, all of them, so that you can actually see how things are going here. So let's close this one. Let's close this one. So we have English. English is the default one. So all you need to do, what I normally do, I create a common like English translation file. I simply copy everything here. I go all the way to this website here. Then you need to just paste here all the content that you have copied and then simply set a language. You have to set a language code here. For example, here it's Arabic. We can say maybe you want to change to German, and then we click this button. It will translate everything for you. And then let's just wait. Yeah, so we have this translated in German, and then all you need to do, copy this, go back to your editor, and then you create a new localization file. For example, for German and JSON, paste everything here. It will not be available immediately, so you need to register this new translation in your list of languages that are supported. So in our case, we just added German, so we just say here .de, and then we need to actually go to our English, for example, and then we say here German. All right, so when we come here once again, we reload the page, we should see German added, and then if we click German, everything is changed to German. So if we select another language, we see German here instead of a Swahili name for German. And you remember, if something is missing, then the default one will be used. So that means that we need to actually do the same. We copy everything, we go here once again, and we add the translations for the other languages. You see? So is that simple? You can actually just do this, like instead of copying everything and the only line that's changed was actually this part, just copy this section here, and then you just have it like this, and then you just translate it maybe to Swahili, and that's it. And then you copy it once again, you come to Swahili, and then you just paste it here, save it, and then when we go back to our browser, we see Swahili now will tell us the actual German translation. Okay, so I think that's it. So let's continue now over to the next part, which is the most important part, the shared translation service. It's not that large, it's something so small, and we will be taking a look at this.